kind of leaves you with the question of where next for this project, Birch, because they're consistent during the season. I know they had their blip this year, but they finished second. But every time they come to big playoff games, it seems to be underperformance, and not just, the disappointment of losing to a better team, which this was a case of again, but we know Ulster should be capable of more than this. So how do you see them trying to recover from this one?
I think it's going to be a long, hard break, and Dan's really going to have to look at how he can reinvigorate them, how he can, give them new energy. It just petered out. They recovered in fairness from that blip, but never fully, to be fair. I think, losing at home in a quarter final, there was a bad crowd. There was a bad crowd, or the atmosphere wasn't anywhere near what it would be, and that's a sign. I know that match was outside your season ticket allocation, so people had to pay, to go to it. But those season ticket holders are a massive part of Ulster's, dominance at home. They're so supportive. They're there week in, week out. But they needed them there at the weekend, because the team were a little bit lackluster throughout. A lot of errors, obviously, but I thought it was more than that. There was real lack of intent or energy or drive to basically, and they allowed Connacht slowly just take them out of sync. And I praise Connacht for what they did, but if you're second in the league, you're playing at home, you're a team who have ambitions around trophies, you can't let someone take you out of sync as often as they did. So I think they look at that. They just haven't, defensively, the defense wasn't brutal against Connacht, and it was a low scoring game, but I don't think their defence is anywhere near as good as it was under Jared Payne. Their attack has gone backwards. With the caliber of players they have in that back line, and now they have experience as well. So they were actually better when they had played less games together. 2 years ago their attack was more dangerous, and you and I have both been trying to find pieces from Ulster of analysis over the last year, and it's getting harder and harder there's less clips to look at, in terms of really highlighting what they can do. So yeah, I don't know. Obviously they brought in, Dave Ewers from Exeter. He's a ball carrier, very, very good operator. Kitchoff will come in after the World Cup, but they're losing, they're losing a couple of high profile props as well. Taman Gallen's gone, from right in saying. Sutherland's gone. So it's not like Kitchoff will give them a loss. Davy Ewers will give them a loss. But there's also quite a few decent players going out the door. And I know that that's pretty much going to happen in all professional rugby teams this year, where, more will go out and come in. But when you're finished second, and then obviously you lose a quarter final, unless you're going to find a new way of changing things up, or you've got, some injured players coming back, or you're going to change the coaching staff, or change one of the coaching staff, it's hard to see a massive improvement straight away. What do you think?
Oh, every time I watch them in playoff rugby, I'm struck by an absence almost of, how do I describe it, of someone else who grabbed those games and shaped them. I always think Ulster are missing that, and obviously they're missing Ian Henderson, their club captain, for this game. But even at that, I don't think that's naturally his game in a way. He's a leader, of course, but I don't know if he's that exact personality. I think the fans would have loved to have seen a big name signing at 10, and I know there wasn't much on the market this summer, and everyone's in contract, and there wasn't a huge amount available on it. And then they certainly did have a look around, but that would have excited the supporters, I think. And even around the captaincy, it went from Billy Burns at one stage, and then it goes to Al O'Connor, and you're thinking, is that pointing to the issue of Dan himself, Dan McFarlands himself, not being quite sure who's the leader of this team? So yeah, that looks like an on-field issue for me, and I think it's also quite obvious that the setting of the assistants and the coaching staff, and just the complementary nature of those skills isn't quite right, and skills and personalities as well. And I'm sure everyone, when we discussed it last week, mutterings about certain players not being content, which is always the case, but when you've got a really nice, cohesive coaching staff, you often kind of nip that stuff in the bud or get on top of it and weed out those kind of sappers from the group. So I think there's a couple of issues there that are kind of holding them back. And I find it very frustrating because I see that same talent there. I see Robert Balogun get on the ball a couple of times in this game, and he opens the game up, and then on the back of that, there's just no foot on the throat to finish the deal. So there's a bit there, Bert, really, and it's they can point out, yeah, we finished second in the league again, there's progress, but they won one game in the Champions Cup. I think that ridiculous format really is what allows them to, say, oh, we had knockout rugby and we were unfortunate to meet Leinster, but they never got going in that competition at all. They've had a big mid-season. It's more than a blip, really, isn't it? A run of bad performances and bad results. So on the whole, I can understand Ulster fans going away dispirited. And after the match on Friday night, Dan McFarlands said, this isn't the time to kind of discuss that stuff. But when do you discuss that? And when do you, I suppose, get a chance to address them now? It's going to be next season before we see him again in the media, certainly anyway. So I kind of get away from that.
Just on that much. I think Dan is very shrewd and a student of the game, a student of sport coaching and all that. So, and I think Dan came into Ulster when they're in a really low ebb, right? Like a really low ebb, and he's rebuilt them to a certain extent. And if you're Dan and you're the Ulster kind of management, you think, run the right track. I think if you remember, they were pretty demoralised after that Leinster knockout game a few weeks ago in the Champions Cup when they were kind of blown away. And I'm sure he probably knew that the evidence that he saw wasn't that they were going to be winning the URC this year based on what's happened in the last 4 or 5 months, to be fair. You know what I mean? Obviously, I think you would have thought we can get through to a semi-final and then hopefully pick up a little bit of form or whatever. But I think the reality now is he's going to have to rebuild him for the second time, if that makes sense. So, not a total rebuild, but just look at it and go, right, that cycle is kind of over to a certain extent, even though you're going to have most of the same players. But now what can we do? What can we come back with to get us to that next level? And that's coaching, and that's constantly for every team. Whether you're a team like Ulster who have ambitions to win a trophy, or whether you're a team like Connacht who are fighting to get into the Champions Cup, or where you're Benetton, where you're trying to get back to where they were under Crowley, etc. Everyone is trying to just look at what they have. So I don't think the review he'll be doing with himself and his board and his coaches will be massively different on the basis of that result against Connacht, but may have to be more ruthless or more aggressive in terms of the actions that they decide to take from it, if you get me. Sometimes, to be honest, sometimes winning games like that game Friday night may actually not help them long term if they were to get knocked out in the semi-final. You know what I mean? But if that's the kind of the point where they go, right, we're not on the right track here, in terms of our culture, in terms of our game plan, in terms of our recruitment retention, we need to be more aggressive, we need to be more radical, so that this time next year we actually have a genuine chance, if that makes sense.
That makes total sense. And I think you've summed up the sense a lot of us have of it. And they've built brilliant foundations now to go on that next journey. It just feels like this one kind of not run out of steam. That's a bit harsh even, but it's reached its conclusion and it's got them to this point, which is so much better than, as you say, where they picked up, which was a real mess. So
just on the 10, Murray. So if rumours are great, it may be the end of Ian Madigan's time in Ulster. I'm not sure on that, but so realistically, they would have had a budget for a 10 anyway. The only question mark is, can they bring in a non-Irish qualified? I think if Madigan leaves, Jade Valerie staying, from what I believe. Yeah. I still think, obviously, he may become number one next year. But I think that's an area that they're going to have to. I know that you said there's not many 10s in the market. I genuinely think they need another 10. Particularly if Mads goes, they need to. That could be an area where they get an instant boost. If they can go out and find. And to be fair to Ulster, when the chips have been down in the past, they've always been, even back to under David Humphreys when they signed Muller and Pinar and even, you know, getting Coetzee, getting Kitchoff is a coup. Getting Vermeulen was a big statement. So I think the Ulster board have always been very supportive and aggressive. Piatow back in the day as well. So you know, and they're not Irish qualified players. They've always been excellent, I think, at getting a high profile player. And with all the financial problems in the game, even there's a strong chance that someone who's on contract at the moment may be gettable post World Cup, just with clubs trying to balance books, etc. So that may be one of the things they can do that could change their profile in a big way.
Dan McFarland definitely making that case right now, probably behind the scenes and looking. And as I say, they've shed a lot of players, and I think it was right to bring down the size of that squad. It was big, it was unruly, it was hard to play everyone. So maybe that frees up a bit of finance. So we'll wait to see what happens in Ulster. As I say, a long off season ahead of them now, and loads of time for Solskjaer.